What are the 5 key things you need to look for when buying fish? And also, what's the differences between all the fish? My name is Michael, I'm the chef camper, and now you can be one too. Allons-y! This is episode 6 of my camper van cooking series, teaching you all the basics that I think you need to know in order to start your own camper van cooking adventure. I've been living and travelling in my van for 6 years, covering quite a lot of Europe. And on that journey, fish is something that has really opened up to me. It's not something I knew a lot about when I first set off, but now my confidence is much higher. So what I want to do in this episode is really share with you what to look for when buying fresh fish, and also looking at the different categories of fish and then different ways in which we can prepare them, ranging from a very easy but delicious recipe to something that shows you how to cook it on a barbecue, because I think sometimes it can be quite challenging to cook fish over fire or on a barbecue just because how delicate it can be. What to look for when you're buying a fish. I'm going to first of all share with you the 5 key things of what to look for when buying a fish. Okay. Number 1, I always look at the eyes. I want to make sure that the eyes are clear, they're not cloudy, they're not grey. You can still see the colour around their eyes. This tells me it's fresh. The next thing I look at is the skin. Is it shiny? Is it glistening, or does it look dull and faded? This is a good indication as to whether or not how it's looking. The third thing I look for are the gills. I want them to be pink and fresh. I don't want them to be grey. And then the fourth thing I look for is the firmness. I have a little feel of it, and if it's feeling mushy and soft, I know it's been sat out too long. If it's feeling firm and nice, then I know it's feeling fresh. And then the final thing, smell. I get my nose right in there, and there is a slight smell to fish, but it's not a strong smell, and it shouldn't be a strong smell. So if it's overpowering you and it's a really overpowering aroma, then don't buy it, because it's probably been sat out too long. What about the varieties? Well, for me, as always, if you've been watching these episodes from the beginning, you'll know that I tend to split things into 2 categories to simplify stuff. And I can do the same with fish. There's white fish and there's oily fish. Pretty much as simple as that. But let me expand a little bit. White fish is the fish that you're going to be familiar with if you've had fish and chips. It's the cod, it's the haddock, it's the pollock, it's that sort of stuff. It's white, delicate fish that's flaky. It doesn't always have a strong flavour, but it can marry with other flavours quite well. And it's not overpowering. It's a great fish to get yourself introduced into fish. So if you don't like fish or fishy things, white fish is the first step for you to start your fish journey. The second type of fish is what we would call oily, fatty fish. And as we said in the meat episode, fat equals flavour. So the fatty, oily fish tends to have more flavour about it. And it tends to have a slightly different texture as well. But it can sometimes be a little bit overpowering for different ingredients. So you need to know what to cook and what to cook with it. Now, both of them cook really well on barbecue, in my opinion. So those are the 2 key categories of fish that I think you want to be thinking about when you're buying fish. Now, you might be thinking about shellfish, which is often with the fish when you go to buy it. Shellfish is an invertebrate. It doesn't have a skeleton. It's an exoskeleton, isn't it? I don't know what someone will correct me on this, but basically they're not classed as fish, they're shellfish, which is why a shellfish allergy is different to a fish allergy. And that's how we categorize it in the kitchen. We have different procedures in place for shellfish. So we're just going to focus on the fish section for this episode. So for this first recipe, we're going to unlock a new skill. We're going to make Gravlax. Now, Gravlax, if you haven't had it before, is quite similar to smoked salmon, but rather than using smoke to cure the fish, we're going to use salt. And we're going to use salt and sugar, a cure mix, to extract the moisture out of it. And this firms up the salmon. And as long as you're using good salmon and fresh salmon, it is completely safe to eat. So don't be worrying, don't be panicking, don't start having a meltdown. This is completely fine. When you make Gravlax, you can keep it in your fridge and you can slice a little bit. You can have it on some scrambled eggs or poached eggs in the morning. You can have it on an open smorgasbord, a Swedish sandwich. You can have an open sandwich with it, or have it on a bagel, or you can chop it up and throw it through some pasta with some lemon and some creme fraiche and some nice herbs. It's a very versatile dish. or you can use it as a starter. And this series is all about being able to create these memorable meals. And for me, Gravlax is a great starter because it's cold. You don't have to, there's no panicking, you don't have to heat it up, and you can take the time to plate it up and make it look beautiful. So when you give somebody their very first course of a meal, they're taken back by the beauty of it. Now, if you want to get scientific, you can, and you can play around with this. But a portion of salmon fillet is usually around 150, 160 grams. Two of them is around 300 to 320 grams. And what I like to do is say about 15 or 20% salt, 15, 20% of total weight, sugar, and then add some aromats into it. Or you can just go, well, let's put 3 tablespoons of salt in the bowl. Let's add, I don't know, let's go for 2 tablespoons of sugar. Brown sugar I'm using for this, but you can use pretty much any sugar. You just get a different flavour and a different texture. Take some of my dill and just finely slice it. Pop that into the dish. And then I've got some lemon peels here, which if you've got a microplane and you haven't lost it like me, you'd use a microplane or a zester and just put some lemon zest into there, but I've just peeled some up, which I'm gonna just tear down and pop into the bowl. Now, the final thing we're going to do is add a bit of Dutch courage. You can add vodka. Vodka's quite common in Gravlax, but I like gin, and if I had a choice, I'd go for Hendrick's gin, because I just think the cucumber notes of it would go well. But gin has aromats in it, has juniper in it and stuff like that, and I think that just adds a nice flavour to the salmon. So we're going to go in, I would say, a shot of gin for this. Just pop that in. Now, I'm going to give this a little stir, like so. And then all we're going to do now is get our salmon and place it in there. So I'll give you a close-up of this. So I'm just going to place my salmon into the mix. Make sure every part of that flesh is covered with the mix. The salt, the sugar, the splash of gin, the lemon, and the dill. And what I'm going to do now is tightly wrap this up in cling film and pop it in my fridge. Now you want to be leaving this for around 8 hours overnight. If you leave it longer, 24, 36 hours, it'll just get firmer and firmer and the texture slightly changes. It's still safe to eat if you leave it longer, but I like to leave it about 8 hours, sometimes overnight. And that way then I can just start slicing into it and tucking into it. So I'm just going to wrap this tightly up now in cling film and pop it in my fridge. And we're going to come back to that later on. My Gravlax is now ready. It's the next day. It's been left overnight, and I tried a little bit of it before I decided to rinse it off. And I was really happy with the taste and the texture of it all. It's soft, but it's got that intense flavour of the gin, the dill, the lemon, and the curry's just worked its magic. Now, I have plated this up, and you can plate it up any way you want, but I'll show a little bit of footage of me plating it up. I basically put some sour cream and horseradish in a little dip and put it across the bottom. I then layered the salmon on top. I put some radishes on there, and I've made a little pickle liquor for some tiny little cucumbers, which I've just put on top. It's almost like, I don't know, a cucumber caviar on top with some lemon and some simple bread. It's a very, very simple, straightforward dish, and it didn't require actually that much effort. And if you spend a little bit extra time plating it up and trying to make it look pretty, when you serve that to your guests as their first course or their second course or just a fish course, then they're going to really appreciate the effort that you've gone to present that. So this is another thing I want to kind of talk to you about, the fact that we could just take simple, humble ingredients, plate them up nice and deliver a great meal. Now don't worry, all of the details about this will be on my website chefcampers.com, where you can find out how to plate this up and where you can get the full recipe on how to do it. I'll try a little bit of this now, so you know I'm not lying, and then we'll fast forward to the second recipe in this episode. So here we go, let's get some of that cucumber on there. That is so good, trust me, that is so good. I'm going to turn the camera off. Stay watching, because the second recipe's coming up, and I've already tried it. I know that's really good, but this is, I'm going to go inside the van. It's freezing cold, it's windy. I'm just going to go and tuck into this now inside. Ta-ra! second recipe is sea bass. Everyone can buy sea bass. You can get sea bass from anywhere. It's a big Mediterranean fish, but we have a lot of it in the UK as well that you can buy. So I think this is a dish that you can go and easily pick up. Now, if you don't like fishes with heads and tails on, then I kind of get it. Just get the sea bass fillets. But if you want real good solid flavour, buy a whole sea bass. And they're quite cheap. How do we cook sea bass on a barbecue? Well, going back to episode 2, we're going to cook it indirect again. Indirect is the secret to not having any flare-ups or any problems when cooking fish. I love cooking fish, and I've actually cooked this dish a few weeks ago over open fire, and I love cooking it like that. But it's a bit more delicate, it's a bit more stressful, and I don't think we should be doing that just yet. If we think about episode 1, it's all about confidence, and this is a fish dish that you should be able to conquer with ease. Remember in episode 2 we used some smoked chips? I'm going to do the same for this. Sea bass is a white fish, it's a flaky fish. It absorbs flavour quite quickly and quite easily, so you don't want to overpower it with too much smoke, but giving it a little bit of flavour will just add to the enjoyment of it all. Now, to go with the roasted sea bass, I'm going to make a dish that's inspired by my time in Portugal. It reminds me about traveling on that south coast in Oli on the fish market and just making different stuff. So for this dish, we've got some little baby peppers here. Now you can get whole red peppers, but we're going to roast them on the barbecue first and get them slow roasted and softened down. We're then going to put them into a little saucepan, and we're going to add some paprika, really good paprika. Buy this one or another decent one, but good paprika is the secret to your dishes tasting good. And this is smoked paprika, which I think just adds another dimension too. We're then going to go to some capers. If you remember in episode 1, this adds different notes of flavour to it. So you can already see now the connections that we're making. And then we've got some olives, which will add some bitter notes, and we're going to chop them up. We've got green and we've got black olives, just for the contrast. And then we've got some beautiful sweet tomatoes, which we're going to roast up gently and pop that into the sauce. So it's going to be roasted pepper, paprika, capers, olives, olive oil, a little bit of balsamic, a little bit of red wine vinegar, some shallots in there that are going to be softened down, and that's just going to be with some parsley, and that's just going to be dressed over the top of the sea bass. It's going to be gently smoked and roasted. Very simple, very easy. We make the sauce first. So let's get the cob lit up, let's get roasting the peppers, let's start doing our mise en place. Let's cook. So the first step in this recipe is roasting the peppers indirectly on your barbecue. My peppers are slowly roasting on the cob, but what I thought I'd do is get ahead a little bit. So I've done all my mise en place on the board. I've got my garlic, my shallots, my capers, my tomatoes, my olives. So I'm just going to start building and developing this sauce a little bit. Once those peppers are roasted, we're going to then slice them up and just pop them into the pan as well and get that roasted pepper flavour going. Okay, those shallots are softened down, so you know what time it is. Time for the garlic. Right, that garlic is softened down. We'll deglaze the pan a little bit. Now, if you haven't got red wine, don't worry about this step, it's not essential. Now, I would say my peppers are about halfway there. So what I'm gonna do is add some of the tomatoes to the peppers in order to get some roasted tomato and pepper flavors going on. So, on with the tomatoes. So that red wine is reduced, and I'd say my peppers are pretty much ready too. So I'm going to chop up the peppers and just add them to this sauce. I'm going to add the capers, I'm going to chop these olives and add them, and I'm going to add around a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons of paprika. I'm then going to reduce it down and then taste it, and I'm probably then going to add some red wine vinegar and some balsamic. But like we said in episode 1, we're just going to taste it and then adjust it to punch the flavour. Right, my sauce is ready. That is a dish that you could just have on its own with some nice dipping bread, and it would be delicious. But we've obviously got the sea bass to cook. So I've placed some lemon inside the sea bass, and I've also soaked some of these wood chips in water. My plan is to smoke the fish. I've got my cob handle. Time to take the cob off. We're gonna get our smoked chips and add them on top of our charcoal. We haven't got long before that smoke starts coming out quite fast. So, and you can see already it started. It's now time to add our fish. Now, as you can see, the smoke is just billowing out of the cob. So I know those smoking chips are just working a treat. Now the smoking chips, I've actually got some juniper berries in, so the scent and the the smell I'm getting from here is quite an aromatic smoke, I would say, which should just impart a little bit of flavour. Okay, I've just temperature probed my fish and we're at the perfect temperature, 58 degrees centigrade, and climbing a little bit. So it's time to plate this up. My sauce is heated up. Let's go. What I like to do on this dish is peel back the skin a little bit. The skin is very tasty, but I think if you peel back the skin a little bit so people can see the flesh, it makes life a bit nicer. We're just going to dress the sauce over the fish. And then I've charred a lemon, which we'll just put in the middle. Voila! Let me give you a close-up. So here we have my sea bass that's just been smoked indirectly on the cob. We've topped it with some roasted red peppers, capers, olives, shallots, garlic, smoked paprika, olive oil, and then we added the flavor boosters and with some parsley in there. This is a very, very simple dish. There was nothing complicated about cooking this fish. When you cook it indirectly, you don't have to fight the flames or fight the flare-ups or worry about the fish falling through the grill. Just simply place it on, drop the lid, and if you've got some wood chips, give it a gentle smoke too, because the fish just responds really well to it. Give this one a go and try the Gravlax too. So before I dig into this, I'm just gonna give it a little try, just so you know I'm telling the truth when I tell you this is delicious. Oh my goodness me. That sea bass is just falling off the bone. I'm going to pop some of the sauce on top. That is just why we should be eating fish. This beautiful aroma of the lemon from inside the fish with the gentle smoke on the outside. That sauce, it's got a little bit of bitter in it, it's got some sweet, it's got some sour, it's got some umami in it, it's got everything. This is just a well-balanced fish dish for me, and if you don't like fish, then give this a go. You don't have to cook the whole fish. I encourage you to try it, but you could just try some sea bass fillets and just cook them gently on that. But with that dish on the side, it's almost like a tapenade on the side, I think it just goes really well. Get some bread, drink some wine, and just sit back and enjoy yourself. That was the fish episode. Next week, we're going to vegetables and fruit. And I know what you're thinking, it's going to be boring. It's not, because we are just one episode away from our grand finale. If you like these videos, drop me a comment below, give me a like, and just please tell your friends and tell people about it. If you know someone who doesn't like fish, then tell them about this episode, because we should all be eating fish. It's beautiful. Ta-ra!